Welcome to Stigma Shakers podcast. I am your host, Ali Hensley, author, speaker, and stigma shaker of the best kind. This podcast is all about shaking and breaking up taboo into digestible chunks, which we like to call our social smoothie. In this podcast, I will ask the difficult questions that can be hard to digest because everyone deserves a little balance in their mental health diet. And let's face it, folks, the only thing normal in this world is different. So my question to you, can we make truth the next biggest trend? Nikki Parkinson is a separation strategist, family law expert, mother of 3, and unmarried. Once upon a time, Nikki spent her 9-to-5 working hours in the corporate world of family law, ticking boxes and filing court orders. Then, her marriage ended and she found herself standing in the shoes of her clients, anxious, alone, and lost despite all of her experiences. She's lived through the difficulties of separation, both her own and her clients. Her goal now is to take the fear factor out of divorce and separation, reduce the shame, start important conversation around the practicalities of ending a relationship, and take the mess out of messy. Welcome back, listeners, to another wonderful episode of Stigma Shakers. And today I am joined by my beautiful friend and guest, Nikki Parkinson from the Divorce and Separation Hub. Welcome, Nikki. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Ali. I'm excited for our conversation.
I've been working with Nikki since early last year, creating content for the Divorce and Separation Hub, and it has been so eye-opening, not only understanding breakups, divorce and separation, but the amount of holistic care that is needed for somebody going through that painful and brutal time, and what you deliver is exceptional. So I think our listeners will learn an awful lot today, Nikki.
Let's hope so, Ali.
Let's
break down some barriers.
Let's break down some stigmas about divorce and separation. So I find it quite fascinating, as we've talked about in our conversations and of course your work, that you were the expert of family law and divorce. On paper you knew all the things, and then you went through, sadly, your own separation. So what was it like walking in the shoes of your clients during that painful time?
It was eye-opening, to be honest. I knew what I needed to do from a legal perspective, but I didn't know how to handle the feelings that came with the separation. So the default position that people think about is when they do separate or they do ask for a divorce, is the first phone call they make is to a lawyer. And I found myself really struggling. I handled things badly, and I think that if my ex and I are truly honest, we didn't do things well. It ended through an event, and it got ugly. It went south real quick.
There seems to be, that when we have our hearts broken, there is a panic and there seems to be this urgency. And as you say, the first phone call is to the lawyer. And why is it in that way that we rush straight to the legalese and we forget about all these other factors that are circling at the time?
I think because society tells us that when something is broken, particularly a marriage and we start to talk about divorce, the first thing we think about is the legal stuff. Whereas the first thing we should be thinking about is, how do we look after ourselves? And we're not necessarily thinking that way because we don't reach out when we need to. We don't look at, and we are hurt, right? But it's, okay, how do I need to fix this? And the fixing comes in the unraveling of might be the financial relationship or sorting out the agreements for the kids. And what we're told is that lawyers do that. And they do that, but is that what you need at those very, very early stages? And no, it's not, unless, of course, there are circumstances where that does, that is certainly an option, or certainly it must be the first point of call if we're talking domestic and family violence, or is there other urgent matters involved. But generally speaking, we should be looking after ourselves first. We should be filling our own cup first. And it's almost like, the air hostess where she says you've got to fit your own mask first. Because if you don't, you're going to crumble.
And I think also one of the big factors that occurs during, I suppose, any ending or a breakup, especially divorce, is that how people perceive that it's a failure. And I feel that in that failing perception is where the shame comes in and where the stigma comes in. How do you see the ending of a marriage? Do you perceive it as failure? Do your clients?
I don't perceive it as failure anymore. In the beginning, I can honestly say that I did feel that I had failed. I felt I'd failed my family, my children, the expectations of what marriage was meant to be like, the friendship groups, the life that we were building that was never going to happen because that was now the ending. So in the beginning I did feel it was a failure, and I think a lot of people come to that ending feeling like they have failed. But I truly believe that at the ending of a marriage that wasn't meant to last forever, or isn't bringing happiness to both parties, then you shouldn't stay in that. And I think that if you do stay in that, for whatever reason it is, are you failing yourself there? As opposed to ending it where you can become truly empowered to be who you want to be, is not a failure. Is your marriage a failure? The whole marriage a failure? Is it the ending? No, it's not.
I always, when we talk to our masses of friends who have all gone through their own breakups, we go through our own breakups. But I always sort of say and intimate that a person's right for happiness is not something that necessarily should be in correlation with guilt. And a lot of guilt, obviously, whether it's the person, typically maybe the person who's leaving the marriage, will feel that guilt. And maybe do you believe that is possibly where that shame stroke stigma comes into play, that I have abandoned or let down my post?
Definitely. Because there's always, so if you're the person that is ending the relationship, there are feelings obviously from the other party, and how they deal with that then has a ripple on effect or a flow on effect to how that may affect you in the beginning. And that's when those feelings start to come up, that I've caused this or I've done this. And you might have said the words, and you might have actually taken the steps to end the relationship or the marriage, but single-handedly, have you blown up your marriage or your relationship? No, because the thing is, relationships take two in any event or any form of relationships that you have, whether it be partners or friendships or work colleagues or relationships with whomever it might be. It takes two people. So it takes two people to have that relationship. So it's not just one person that blows it up.
And the phrase that just popped into my head then is, we're staying because we're doing it for the kids. But what is that teaching our children?
I can understand families wanting to stay together for their children. I get it. But is that the right decision? And only they can answer that. But I will say generally that if people are staying in a relationship or a marriage for something or someone else, be it security or their children, then particularly their kids, what is that modelling to our kids? What sort of relationships are they going to then have in the future because they think, oh, it's okay, mum or dad did it, I can do it, I can do that. And they've watched people stay in miserable relationships for long periods of time.
It sounds to me almost it's kind of keeping the generational trauma going. And I remember reading once about how trauma can actually last 7 generations through the patterns that we see as our family history. So absolutely, I think teaching our children what the true version of love is, whether that's for a person or yourself, has got to be the bigger message than just, rolling up your sleeves and trying hard for another 10 years. And I think we talked about actually once how many times somebody will almost get to the point of separation. It's almost about 7 times, 7 attempts to leave a relationship.
Before they leave? Yeah.
And that probably just stems into, I think, the whole concept around the stigma of divorce. And something that you said, and I really, really encourage our listeners to go and take a look at this YouTube incredible talk that Nikki did for TEDx Byron Bay Women, which will be in the show notes. And you carved a notion that is, we marry as a community, but we divorce alone.
We do, though, don't we? It's and I think things are changing. So I'm going to preface with, I truly believe that there is a positive movement which is coming, and it is changing. But we have this incredible notion that the joining of two people, and we're coming together to marry, and we're bringing friends and family and celebration to that. Why can't you feel that at the ending as well, if that's what you choose? Now, it might take you a little while to get to that, but I think the divorcing alone is so prevalent because of the shame and the stigma that society places on a divorce or a separation. And we're not meant to do it, or we're not meant to have these conversations. You can do that, but let's sit behind closed doors and have the conversation. Let's not do it loud and proud in public, because it's messy and people don't want to get involved in the messy.
Absolutely. And you think about like the 150 wedding invites that go out, and everyone's getting their most fanciest outfit together, and we're clinking champagne and we're celebrating the beginning of something. But when the ending comes, and I find that it's very interesting what you say, people don't like to get into the messy, but they'll be there after the fact. They'll be there to sort of herald you the hero after the fact. But when the ending comes, it's almost like the people are just, that wedding list goes down to maybe 1 or 2 people. And yet endings can be a celebration. As painful as they are, they can be something to be celebrated and almost looked forward to.
100%. I think they should be a rite of passage, Ali, because things end. It's inevitable. We can't stop it sometimes. I mean, we can see it coming, but we can't press pause. And we can't stop that from happening. And it is inevitable that sometimes marriage ends. I'm a big believer in that humans aren't meant to mate and marry for life. I think there are many people that come into our lives over a period of time. And I know that people will disagree. Some people will disagree with me there, because marriage is such an institution. But I don't believe that we are. So why aren't we celebrating these endings? And I know that it's very sad at the very beginning, but it can be a celebration. It can be. I mean, where are the divorce parties? Where are the divorce registries?
You brought up a really good point about you know, that after the pain comes the celebration. And you did say something again in this wonderful talk, and we've said it before, and it's an incredible article actually, about the friends who will then invite you back into the fold and those who won't. And those who do invite you into the fold, I want to say the word dessert to you. What is that cracker? What is that belter of a line that I've heard you say?
Been taken off the dinner party list for fear that you're going to steal a husband between main course and dessert.
Have you felt that? Have you had that?
Oh, yeah. 100%. 100%. And let's just say that there is no chance of me stealing a husband between main course and dessert, or a husband at all, full stop. So,
right.
But
you're not a threat.
I'm not but people feel that it's almost like you're going to catch the divorce disease, right? Like things might be a little bit shaky in their relationships, and they're like, oh gosh, they've done it. They're doing okay. She's thriving. He's having the time of his life. I don't think we'll invite them. Don't want to catch that.
I wonder also if, you know, and I'm not trying to shame or blame any of those who do stay in the marriage, but I wonder sometimes if one of the reasons that people will scuttle off to the sides is because there is a mirror in that person that's might suggesting, ooh, they've done it. Like if there was it's almost it's quite confronting. It makes us think about our own values when it comes to what we will push through, which I do not like the word push at all, in the sort of like the divorce dynamic. I think it's and because we don't talk about it, really, that's where the shame and the stigma breeds, right?
It does. It's funny you should say that. I had a very good friend of mine who kind of dropped off the face of the earth after I after I was separated in the very early stages, and recently she's come back into my life, and we have been friends for a long time. But she said she was very apologetic, and she said to me, you know, I couldn't be there for you because I saw so much of what was going on in what was going to happen to me, and I just knew that the mirror was shining my way, and I knew that it was coming, and I couldn't be there because I didn't want to face reality that was going to happen to me too. And it does sometimes. I think people do drop off, and for their own reasons, and I don't think we can be judgmental about that. And it's painful at the time because you want your friends to be around, and you want to be held, and you want to feel like you've got your people and your community, but sometimes they're not there for a variety of reasons.
As you say, everybody has their own individual circumstances, and I think just even starting this conversation hopefully will encourage other people just even to have a health check-in when it comes to their own relationships in that way. You said at the beginning of our chat about your own separation and things that you feel that you didn't do necessarily, and I say in air quotes, right? What are some of the behaviours or acts, if you like, that people do in that first impulsive stage of a breakup that you would consider not so healthy? And what could you replace that with a little bit more healthier ways?
Yeah, I think that at the very beginning, particularly if there is an event or if you are blindsided, there's a lot of hurt there. And when people are in that very early stage of feeling that they are hurt or they feel fear of the unknown, they then behave from a place of trying to get to the next stage really, really quickly. And with that comes communication. And communication is, if you've listened to me talk, you'll hear me say it so often, that it is the heart of many or all relationships. It starts there. So I think many people, when they are in that space of fear and unknown and hurt, and they're terrified, their communication skills just fall off the bandwidth, right? And they do that really badly because they're reacting instead of responding, and they're coming from that place of fear and that place of hurt and anger. And anger being a stage 1 emotion, it can be it then turns into that holy shit or that fearful moment. So they're trying to get answers and they're trying to do things so they know how to, they're reacting out of that fight, flight, freeze mode, as opposed to, hang on a minute, let's just take a moment. What is it that we need to actually have conversations about? And sometimes it's nothing. It's just the banter or it's the argument that was there in the first place, but it's just continuing after separation. The first thing people really need to recognise is check yourself. Check why you're communicating. Check how you're communicating. Check tones, language, all of those types of things. And you might feel those things, but do you need to say those to your ex? And the answer is no, you don't. Whatever they are, those things, you can say those in a healthier way later, right? You don't have to say those. And it might be, for instance, they've pissed you off, right? So immediately you are bouncing back with an aggressive message that meets them at their level. So then automatically you're in this to and fro of an argument that could have started from nothing.
And I think some of the shame that people might carry post-breakup and maybe even years down the line is, I wish I handled that better. And that's almost like the personal stigma that we're holding over ourselves. It's like, I wish I had done that differently. That wasn't my finest hour. And you always talk about, and sorry if I've sort of dovetailed somewhere else, but you always talk about time. And I love that notion of just pausing and taking a breath.
Giving yourself the gift of time, Ali, is what I often say to my clients, because I think we tend to, like I said, rush, and we rush through because we're told we need to get this sorted out. We need to get this fixed. We need to, get divorced, have the legal sorted out. We need a parenting plan. We need all the things done. But actually, do you? Give yourself the gift of time to let this land and settle. Don't put that pressure on yourself unnecessarily, because often things don't need to happen in that time frame. So the pause, there's nothing that, well, I won't say nothing, but there are not a lot of things that need an immediate response. So unless it is urgent or an emergency, you don't need to give that urgent response. So give yourself time to process, articulate what you want to say, write it out in a journal, get those feelings out, and then come back to, okay, what is it that needs to be responded to? Because not everything does.
And I think when, during our working together, and something that I'd love you actually to sort of share with the listeners was the Separation Summit that you hosted last year with an amazing lineup of guests, which really took your clients and your community through all those really poignant steps alongside time. I think even maybe was it one factor of that was the legal, and there was about 9 other, or to talk about the different areas of that summit that people might not necessarily realize is even part of a divorce and separation that can really help people.
Well, I think it's, like I said before, I think there are various different components of it, and it's your self-care. What is it that you need to be able to do to help you and your family moving forward? Financials are a really big factor in any separation, because we all want to feel financially secure. So there's this fear that you're not going to be, and you're going to it's going to cost you a shit ton of money to get divorced. So let's break down that myth. Then there's, looking at, it goes back to looking after yourself. So how are you doing that? Are you eating well? Are you exercising? Internally, what are you, holding on to that you could get rid of? Let's bring some humor into it and joy, right? So let's bring the joy of, and it doesn't mean that you are joyful because you are divorcing, but where is the joy in you? How are we bringing that back into your life, and how do we recalibrate who we are? Because along with divorcing, and I found interesting for myself as well, I lost myself in the marriage, and for a long time, I spat back out again, and I'm like, okay, who am I? Who the fuck am I? And I felt a little bit of shame about that. I'm like, how did I lose myself along the way? And how do I find myself again? So our guest speakers were from health professionals to people that are helping you feel your best self, like Lizzie Williamson, for example, 2-minute moves.
Amazing.
Getting up there and doing what you can for yourself, even if it's just for 2 minutes. And then we had from that end, we had right the way through to the Deputy Justice of the Family and Federal Court of Australia, who had some really insightful things to say about rushing through and these legals, like giving yourself the gift of time, because you're so foggy at that time in your life. It's everything is the outside, and the internal noise is so prevalent that how can you then make decisions with a clear frame of mind and with clarity of thought for your future? Very difficult to do.
Your lineup was incredible, and I really do encourage people to go and look at the Separation Summit, because it's live on demand and it's incredible. And I was thinking then about, how people do get lost in their relationships, and they shrink and they morph. And I read something the other day that kind of feels very linked to the sort of shame spiraling that we can actually beat ourselves and berate ourselves up for. And that is to not shrink to the size of the love capacity that someone else has for you. And I think we don't always like how we react in the face of rejection, in the face of abandonment. We don't necessarily make the right phone calls at 11 o'clock at night after a bottle of Chardonnay to our ex. We don't always show our best selves when we're scrolling through Instagram and wondering how they're moving on with their lives. And I think it's about giving permissions to really hurt. And as you say, like, the physical pain is linked to emotional pain. It's exactly the same in our bodies. Not only is society like laying on a bit of shame because it's broken, you broke something, but it's also that are we broken, and no one wants to think that they're unlovable or not enough for somebody else. Okay, so when you come out of that long-term, medium-term relationship, all those first year first, and you always said the fridge is now yours. I think it's so. And dating, let's talk about dating. That's always been a fun
that's a fun topic.
Well, the thing is, you come out of these long relationships and you're like, I don't know how to do this. Dating apps, for instance, I mean, they're a shocker. I think people should come with their own T&Cs, to be honest.
100%. Yeah, they need a guidebook.
I don't know what. I think they do courses. There is. I actually met a guy online a few years ago who actually wrote a book about how to maximize your Tinder positive experience or something like that. And it's shocking, and I didn't do it very well. I didn't know the rules at all. But I think it's quite, something that we've spoken about is single shaming as well. Tell us about that, Nikki.
Oh, the single shaming, Ali. It's alive and well. This is a little bit of advice for friends and family that you want to say, but shouldn't say, to somebody that is single. So I haven't repartnered since my marriage breakdown, and I've done that consciously. So for two reasons. I have said to myself, I'm not going to settle again, and the next person that I repartner with is going to be, I'm going to heal myself. I'm going to take my best version of me into that relationship. I don't want to make the same mistakes that I made, and I'm grateful for those mistakes because they were all learnings. So let's not call them mistakes, let's call them learnings.
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot about myself and the type of person that I am and that I want to take into the next relationship. But after you've been single for a little while, everyone tries to come up with the reasons that you should repartner and you shouldn't be on your own and that aren't you lonely and all of those things. And I know where you're going with this because it was my it's my 93-year-old Nan who starts the single shaming. And look, Nan, bless you, she'll never listen to this, but
bless Nan.
Bless Nan. It comes from the right place. But Nan came to stay with me last year for 3 weeks. And it was such a wonderful experience on many, many levels. I mean, who gets to have their 93-year-old Nan come and stay with them for a long period of time? And we shared a glass of wine and watched Home and Away every evening. But after that, she'd start with the Nicole, as she calls me. Now, why aren't you repartnered? You need someone in your life. And this goes on for 3 weeks, every night. And it's like, Nan, I don't need someone in my life. I'm not going to just replace somebody because I'm on my own. I love my own company. I love the freedom that brings me. I love the relationship that I now have with my children because they get the best version of me. And I love the relationships that I've formed, or reformed with my friends and family because I have the time to give to those people. And it is when you give that time to someone, it is 100%. And I don't need to replace the moments of being alone with the thought that I am lonely, because those moments of being alone are quite sacred to me because I live a very busy life. Yeah. But it's the old scenario, I suppose, that once you separate, you must repartner. And how could you possibly be happy on your own? And why don't you have a new husband, wife, partner in your life? And, it's the whole setting up. I'll come and, my physio is also single. Maybe you should come up and have a chat with him next time he comes to the house. It's like, thank you, but no. So
true.
Friends,
God bless you, Nan.
God bless you, Nan. Right?
God bless Nikki's Nan. Wherever you are out there, please just lay off the single shaming just a little bit for Nicole. I worked in a job which was it was a 9 to 5, but it also had elements of events, so like post 9 to 5 work. And it was odd because naturally by default, not just was it only in my job description, but because they knew that I wasn't in a relationship, it was, Ali's going to be doing the event because she doesn't have anyone on the side of her apartment door. And I felt, and it was kind of jesty, but I actually felt quite a lot of shame in that moment because it was almost, oh, you're right, I haven't got anybody in my life. And a really good friend said to me, actually, I think it's important to say and ask yourself the question, do I need them in my life or do I want them in my life? And I think that's such a big motivation. And I was having the best decade of my life, actually. I was, dating badly in Bondi, but I think Bondi is a bit of a shark fest, no pun intended, it's a very interesting little bubble. But I had a lot of shame, and I actually said to my dad once, I was like, Dad, I'm so sorry that I haven't given you the opportunity to walk me down the aisle, or I'm so sorry for my own reasons. Obviously I am a loud and proud, child-free, childless because of infertility. But I was almost again, I'm so sorry that I haven't given you the children or the experiences that you might want to see. And it's that status that society pins on us of what being a proper adult looks like. And in fact, it's none of those, I don't think. Anyway.
It's none of those. I agree with you. It's none of those. And it's by choice, I think. You know, if for instance you do want someone in your life, then go and find that person. But I will say, be careful for the reasons, or be careful of the reasons why you are doing that. For me and my lovely Nan, you know, I may not repartner by the time she goes off into her next life. I mean, she's fit and healthy, but let's be honest, she's 93. So, I'm apologising to Nan all the time. Oh, no, I haven't repartnered. And you feel the need to do that because that's somebody else's projecting that, I think, onto you. So then you're thinking, oh gosh, am I broken? Are my expectations too high? Am I doing it for the right reasons? It takes you in a lot of different directions, I think, Ali.
I am a fond believer that I do not like the following statement: to get over someone, do not get under someone else. I really hate, like, people always say, get under someone to get over someone. I'm like, oh, do I have? No, it's painful. And not like physically painful.
No.
A breakup is, no, let's not do that. Let's eradicate that one from the books as well. Or please go, if you want to go and spread your fruit, then that's of course your complete choice.
You do you.
So in talking about like some of the more, let's talk about, the more positive aspects, I guess, of the divorce and separation process. What would you say to someone listening who is on the precipice or in the thick, glucky, icky phases of decision making to impart some positivity, impart some hopefulness into their world?
I think it's important to really remember that these feelings don't stay forever. So whilst it is messy, and I'm not going to lie to you or sugarcoat it, it is messy and it's shitty when you're in the trenches. There's no escaping that. You've got to move through that. You've got to really recognise what it is that you want. I will say you will come out the other end of that, and that's where it is liberating and exciting, and allow yourself to feel those snippets of excitement from time to time. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. If you find or you catch yourself thinking, gosh, this new life could just be the best thing that has ever happened to me, feel that, embrace that, take that with you, take that feeling with you. You'll know what it is when you feel it. And when you're in those deep, dark moments in the trenches, remind yourself of that feeling. Take that with you when you are feeling really rubbish. You will get through it. I promise you that. You will get through it.
We are so much stronger, I think, than we give ourselves credit for. And as I always say, when my mum used to leave at the airport, and when she used to visit me in Australia, after the goodbye comes the hello. After the heartbreak may come the falling in love. And how much fun is that? So that's a really lovely place for us to sort of think about wrapping this up, but not before I have some lovely little juicy questions for you.
Ooh.
So, yes. I was about to say, no, I'm not asking you out on a date. I do not know where that came from. I would, though. Okay, so anyway, we digress. Now, this podcast is all about shaking and breaking up stigmas into digestible chunks for others to understand and absorb, which we like to call our social smoothie. With that metaphor in mind, Nikki, what goodness or societal ingredient would you put into your social smoothie?
Ooh, It's a great question. That's a hard question, actually. The ingredients that I would put into my smoothie. I would put in your virtues, your values, and your destination.
Yummy. That is good. Does your smoothie have a name?
Oh gosh, let's pick my favourite dessert. It's got to be called tiramisu. Or we're streaming from Byron Bay. It's got to be a green smoothie, surely.
It's got to be a green. I think we'll call it the tiramisu because you do not steal husbands between main course and dessert because, frankly, you just want the tiramisu. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good night. And because we're in Byron Bay, this smoothie will probably cost you 3 weeks' rent.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, whatever you think it is, double it. Or triple it, actually. You know, the Byron Bay
cost of living. Yep.
Cost of living.
That's it, Nikki. And one question I always love to ask people is that your topic today is obviously talking about divorce and separation. So if you were to see a headline on the news tonight, a breaking headline, what would that headline be?
Are we talking positive divorce headline? Are we breaking the internet?
Oh yeah, we're crashing the internet. We're crashing the World Wide Web.
Oh, we're crashing. Okay, we're crashing. Okay, great. Gosh, might need my trusty content helper here, but
I know what it is.
Let's brainstorm this, Ali.
Taking the mess out of messy with Nikki Parkinson.
That's
Divorce and Separation Hub.
Yeah, only my nan calls me Nicole.
Taking the mess out of messy. That's our headline. I think that's amazing. That's a really great headline. If you could just impart just one little piece of advice to our listeners, what would it be?
I would say to you at the very beginning of your divorce or separation, or even pre-decision making, think about who you are and who you want to be through this process. What are your values and virtues, and how are you going to remain true to those throughout this process when it gets tough? Take those with you. Remember what they are, even if it's a word or it's a feeling that you want to have. And then from there, use that in your decision-making process and take that with you along the way.
That's beautiful, Nikki. Thank you so much. And how can people find you?
You can find me at the Divorce and Separation Hub online, and I am on all socials at the Divorce Hub.
Perfect. And that is a wrap.
And the podcast.
Thank you so much. Oh, the podcast. Amazing podcast. We'll put that in our show notes. Thank you so much, Nikki. Sending you my love all the way from the UK to Byron Bay.
Oh, back at you, Ali. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you today.